Billionaire pretends to be asleep to test his maid's son. The kid's next move stunned everyone. He thought they were beneath him. To the billionaire, his maid and her quiet teenage son were just part of the background present, but invisible. One night, he staged a cruel little experiment. He lay on the couch, pretending to be asleep, determined to prove what he already believed about poor black kids like this boy. What the hidden cameras captured over the next few minutes did not just shock him, it shattered his certainty, exposed his prejudice, and changed more than one life. When power tests the powerless, who really ends up being judged? By the time the city woke up, the billionaire's day was already planned to the minute. Meetings, markets, private jets all orbiting around his name, his money, his comfort. In his glass mansion on the hill, doors slid open at his touch, lights obeyed his footsteps, and no one ever told him no. Somewhere in the quiet corners of that same house, his maid moved like a shadow. Angela had learned how to be invisible, how to clean around his life without leaving a trace of her own. Every morning before sunrise, she arrived through the staff entrance, carrying the weight of 2 jobs and a teenage son who waited for her in the tiny room the staff used for breaks. Her son Jamal did his homework there, surrounded by marble floors and designer furniture he was never meant to touch. He knew every rule without being told. Take off your shoes, keep your voice down, never wander, never look too curious. He had grown used to the way security guards watched him an extra second longer, to the way some guests clutched their bags when he walked by. To the billionaire, Jamal was just another poor black kid in his house arrest to be managed, not a life to be understood. Angela noticed the way her employer's eyes hardened when they landed on her son, the way his hand tightened around his phone whenever Jamal crossed the room. Nothing dramatic had happened yet. No incident, no accusation, just a growing suspicion in a man who was used to being right. One quiet afternoon, as he glanced at the boy moving carefully through his living room, an idea began to form, an idea that would turn their ordinary, unequal routine into a silent test. The idea did not leave the billionaire alone. It followed him through board meetings and charity galas, through speeches about opportunity and merit, through photo shoots where he posed smiling beside scholarship students who looked a lot like Jamal. In public, he was the generous patron of the underprivileged. In private, he replayed every moment the boy had walked past his art, his office, his bedroom door, certain that temptation would eventually win. He convinced himself it was not racism, it was caution, responsibility, common sense. He read crime headlines and nodded, telling himself that statistics did not lie, that poor kids, especially black boys from neighborhoods he would never drive through, were simply risks waiting to be confirmed. He never asked why Jamal always sat with his back to the wall, why he never touched anything he did not have to. He only watched, waiting for one wrong move. The plan began with cameras, extra ones, discreet black lenses tucked into corners that already held others. The staff assumed it was just another security upgrade. After all, valuable art and jewelry slept in this house every night. Only the billionaire and his head of security knew that one particular camera, angled just above the living room couch, had a different purpose. He selected the day carefully. Angela's schedule said she would be alone in the main house for several hours, with Jamal quietly doing homework as usual. Before they arrived, he laid the trap, a wallet, overstuffed with cash, placed carelessly near the edge of the coffee table. A limited edition watch, left gleaming on the glass. On the couch, he stretched out and closed his eyes, slowing his breathing until his chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of sleep. In another room, security monitors flickered. A guard watched as the billionaire's body stilled, as the scene set itself like a stage. All that was missing was the moment they expected, maybe even wanted, the boy reaching, hesitating, then giving in. It would be proof, they told themselves. Proof that their instincts were right. Angela felt the tension the second she stepped into the living room. The billionaire's presence in the middle of the day, his body frozen in a too-neat sprawl on the couch, the careless display of things he usually protected, none of it made sense. Her pulse quickened, but she pushed the unease down. She had learned that suspicion was a luxury she could not afford. Her job was to clean, to keep moving. Jamal took his usual place at the small table near the window, opening his worn notebook. The room around him shimmered with wealth. The polished floors, the towering glass, the quiet hum of hidden machines. He kept his eyes low, but he could feel the weight of the billionaire's presence even in supposed sleep. Years of watching how adults looked at him had taught him that some silences were louder than words. As Angela dusted around the coffee table, her hand passed within inches of the wallet and the watch. She did not touch them. She did not even allow her gaze to linger. She had heard too many stories of accusations that began with a glance and ended with handcuffs. She finished quickly and moved away, leaving the objects exactly where they lay, bright, exposed, waiting. Minutes crawled. The billionaire's breathing stayed slow and even, but his mind raced. Nothing was happening. The boy remained at the table, writing, erasing, frowning at a page filled with equations. The trap sat untouched. Annoyance pricked at him. Maybe the boy was simply waiting for the right moment. Maybe temptation worked slowly. Then a small, unexpected thing shifted the scene. A faint vibration rattled against the glass tabletop a phone, left face down beside the billionaire's hand, buzzing with an incoming call. It edged closer to the side with each tiny tremor, inching toward the floor. Jamal noticed it before anyone else. His pencil paused in midair as the expensive device trembled on the brink, ready to fall. The cameras captured the exact instant he pushed back his chair and stood up. What he chose to do next would not only expose one man's prejudice, it would force everyone in that house to decide which story about him they really believed. Jamal moved before he could think about it. Years of being told not to touch anything collided with the instinct not to just watch something break. The phone shuddered once more, slid over the edge, and dropped. He lunged, catching it a split second before it hit the marble. For a heartbeat he stood frozen, the weight of a device worth more than everything in his mother's bank account resting in his hand. Every story he had heard about black boys being blamed for what they tried to fix flooded his mind. Carefully, he set the phone back on the table, farther from the edge. Only then did he notice how the wallet bulged. The watch glinted, both placed too perfectly in the open. He felt the sting of understanding. This wasn't carelessness. This was bait. He could feel cameras on his skin like heat. He imagined the footage, a still frame of him reaching hands near money that wasn't his. No sound, no context, just an image ready to become a lie. So he did something no one expected from a quiet, invisible boy. With shaking fingers, he pulled out his own cracked second-hand phone. He stepped back, making sure his hands were away from the billionaire's things, and snapped a photo. The objects exactly as they had been laid out. The billionaire, motionless on the couch, the distance between Jamal and everything he was supposed to be tempted by. The soft click of his camera was the only sound. At that exact moment, the billionaire woke. He bolted upright, playing surprise, scanning the room with a performance of confusion that quickly hardened into anger when he saw Jamal standing near the table. Within seconds, security stormed in, hands clamped around Jamal's arms, rough and ready, as if they had been waiting for permission to treat him like a suspect. Angela watched her son pinned in the house. She scrubbed clean, accused in a life she was never allowed to touch. Generations of warnings flashed through her mind. In a ring of wealth and power, one black boy stood trembling, trapped between what he had actually done and what they had already decided to believe. The room froze in a strange, heavy silence. Jamal's chest heaved under the grip of the guards, his thin arms pinned as if he were dangerous, as if his very existence in that space was a threat. Angela's hands trembled, not from surprise, she had always feared something like this, but from the sick confirmation that the danger she warned her son about had finally arrived. Then Jamal remembered the photo. He forced the words out through shaking lips, insisting they look at the cameras, insisting they see his picture. The billionaire agreed, confident the footage would finally vindicate his suspicions. In the security room, screens lit up with every angle of the trap he had so carefully arranged. They watched it all. The wallet and watch, deliberately placed, the billionaire lying down, eyes closing in practiced stillness. Angela cleaning around the table, carefully avoiding, even brushing against the items. Jamal, at his spot, focused on homework. The phone sliding, Jamal diving to catch it, placing it gently back. Jamal stepping away from the table, pulling out his own battered phone, documenting the scene not as a thief, but as someone who knew exactly how quickly he could be turned into one. On the screen, there was no crime, only a boy trying to protect himself from a story that had been written about him long before he arrived. For the first time, the billionaire saw himself in that footage, not as a wise protector of his home, but as a man lying in wait, hoping a stereotype would come true. The weight of that realization settled heavier than any fortune he had ever earned. He tried to apologize. He offered money, a promotion, opportunities. But there are insults that do not wash off with gifts. Angela resigned before the day ended. Jamal walked out with her, silent, carrying no stolen watch. No wallet, just the knowledge that even when he did everything right, his innocence had been optional, dependent on evidence he had been clever enough to collect. He would replay that day for years. Not the part where he was proven innocent, but the part where no one in that room seemed surprised that he might be guilty, because that is the quiet truth behind so many stories like his. In mansions and offices, in stores and classrooms, suspicion wraps itself in words like caution and security, and black children are treated as problems to be managed instead of people to be trusted. This time, cameras saved him. His own foresight saved him. But how many boys, just like Jamal, never get that chance? How many lives are scarred or ended because someone with power decided to run a test they already knew the answer to? If the story unsettles you, it should. The real question is, in your own life, when you look at someone like Jamal, are you seeing a risk or a human being?